So we're going to need to figure out what that LTC, loan to cost, is. And if you don't know what the cost is, again, I'm going to go through that in the example. And then you're going to need to find out the refi LTV as well. LTV is loan to value, right? These are going to be the two key numbers that you're going to want to get really clear on with your lender in order to know how much money you really need for this. And then where can you get this important seed capital that you're going to be recycling? Where are we going to get it from? If you already have it, great. If not, you're going to get it from partnerships. I know for me, the first person I'm going to go to is going to be my sister, because she's already agreed if I find a good deal, she will fund it, right? And she will be my partner on it, right? All the money that you're getting doesn't have to be in the form of a loan. You can partner with people who have money, like my sister, who doesn't want to be bothered with figuring all this out. That's my part. That's my contribution, is I manage it. She's just going to fund it and enjoy the benefits of seeing the awesome return that's going to beat the S&P, right? Questions on fundamentally this step? Sorry.
Especially recently. Sorry, go ahead.
Anything before I move on? Okay, let's look at an example of this. So start with the market details. Suppose that the ARV that we're going to get our property to after it's renovated is going to be $550, right? Try to hit that median sales price as an example. Say that the reno is just a fix what's broken, 50 grand, right? That's the type of property we're looking at. We're just going to fix what's broken. We're not trying to do a full gut here. Let's say that the purchase price that we're able to get it for is $335, and let's say that the cost is going to be these two things together. It's going to be that $385, right? Because you have the purchase and you've got the reno. So here we have our $385. This is where we come over to get our hard money loan so we can buy the property. So if the loan to cost was 90%, then they're going to give us 90% of the total cost, right? Stop me if I'm making a mistake, anybody, or if you have something to add, because I'm not a lender. Which means my piece of that pie, the equity or the down payment that I need to show up with, I'm going to call my sister and be like, yo, Christina, I need $38.5. That's what I need. This is what I'm putting in, okay? And then I get that loan, we buy it, we renovate it. We're going to have to refinance in order to pull the money back out after it's rented, right? So this LTV, this loan to value, is they're only going to give me a long-term loan, probably a DSCR loan, for 70%, right? So that means I'm going to pull out $385. Now that $385 is more than the loan that I have to pay back, right? Why is this worth more? It's because after that reno, I was able to get this, which by the way, sick deal. Good luck if you're getting this number. But if you got this and you raise the value after renovation up to this $550, then that's where we're able to pull out all this money, is because we're basing this refi number off of how much it's worth now that it's all fixed up and rented, okay? So let's say we do that. And we're going to get that cash out in hand. We're going to pay back the loan. And wouldn't you know it, I got my starting money back out. That's why I picked these numbers. Basic rule of thumb, if you're just trying to get a sense of whether a BRRRR is even possible on this property, is treat it like it's a flip. Is there enough meat on the bone that I could flip it? If there is, then there's a good possibility you could BRRRR this too. Obviously, this is oversimplified because we're not taking into account all the other costs that are associated, but it's a presentation to get everybody on the same level, on the same page. You're going to go through the details with your lender.
Questions, thoughts? It can be complicated. Please go.
You should probably clarify why hard money.
Why hard money?
Yep.
Yeah. So the reason you're getting hard money is so that way you're able to base the loan off of the asset and not off of the not off of you, right? The difference between hard and soft money is essentially what the loan is being based off of. If it's based off the deal, that's going to be hard money. If it's based off of your capacity to manage the loan and pay for it, that's going to be soft money, okay? And if we're trying to do this at scale and recycle this, we're going to need these commercial terms that can move quickly. Is that how you would answer it, or do you have something to add?
Yeah, I guess there's more to it. When I did mine back in the day, it was a distressed place, and I couldn't even get even just a normal loan from an agency or anything just because it was distressed, so you're forced into hard money.
That's a good point. Most of the conventional type loans or the owner-occupant style loans, a lot of the times the property just won't qualify for that, right? So we did sort of a lipstick amount of renovation here, but chances are if you're going to be finding a flip-worthy deal, it may need a full gut. And so we're going to have to adjust these numbers accordingly to make sure that you can afford the full gut.
But the point is, the property needs to be in a certain condition in order for normal lenders to take on the risk of the loan, whereas hard money folks will take properties in more inferior condition so that it might give you the type of ratios necessary to execute this type of plan. So yeah, that makes sense.
And so, yes.
I'd say one of the other things that I really ran into with
Actually, do me a favor, this, you won't play over us now, but for the online audience, they'll be able to hear you better. Thank you.
one of the things that they never really talk about with hard money is that the location matters a lot as well too. So if you're trying to do this in rural areas that are outside major cities, then you're going to run into issues finding lenders who will do that. But there are lenders that do exist.
It's a good point. Geography matters. Thank you. Any other questions,
So
comments?
if I do a rural BRRRR, do I come to you? Yeah, you know people? All right, I'll remember. That's one of the tips for networking, by the way. We mentioned a joke about the house hat king. His business multiplied many times after he niched down to one thing, right? So this is just a personal example. I guess it's not exactly personal. I know him. Don't come to networking saying that you're everything to everyone. You will be infinitely forgettable and no one will know you, right? So try to niche down to know exactly what it is. Like that might not be your thing, but unfortunately that's in my brain now.
It is.
All right, perfect. Okay, other questions on this before we move on? Because conceptually what I'm trying to help you do is first we understood why we're doing this, and then if you're gonna pursue this, you next need to really understand the numbers. And if you don't feel like you have a grasp of the numbers, talk to a lender because they help people math out if this is a deal or no deal all day long every day. So talk to a lender until you feel comfortable that you can math it. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, next is rent. Right? So in order to understand the rent, why this is the next step, after you figured out money and who you're getting the money from, now the next step in your journey in order to successfully do this is you need to understand the management piece and the market selection. If I'm having a consultation with you and you tell me I want to do a BRRRR, this is going to be one of the first things that I talk about. I'm going to be asking you, okay, are you going to self-manage or are you getting a property manager? And if you're self-managing, are you brand new at this and you're going to get yourself in all kinds of heaps of trouble because you don't know what you're doing and you made 5 different mistakes and now they're suing you and, oh God, why did I buy in DC, right? That sort of a problem. So you'll tell us more about that later, right? Yeah, so self-managing versus property manager is also going to impact, you know, if you tell me, oh, I'm going to self-manage because I don't want to pay the 10% in order to have a manager. Okay, are you willing to drive to Florida to deal with the issues? Do you have any family in Florida that can handle this for you? If you don't have boots on the ground, I wouldn't buy there. So it's going to restrict where you're willing to go. If you tell me that the furthest you're willing to go is 30 minutes, now we know a little bit more about your buy box. So this is an important decision that you need to take the time to figure out. The next thing is to understand what kind of a market you're in because you're going to be calculating your returns differently if you're in a cash flow market or an appreciation market, right? You cross that border and go into West Virginia, you're in a different world, right? West Virginia, we're not talking about the kind of prices you're seeing in McLean or Alexandria, right? It's different. So if you're coming to an appreciation market like ours, understand it's going to be like to cash flow for a long-term rental, like 50% down at today's rates, right? You're not going to be able to handle, you know, 5% down, 30% down. It's probably not going to cash flow with that number. So you're going to need to take that into consideration where your return is going to be less the cash flow in our market, and it's going to be much more watching that grow. Who was you're the one who helped me sign the paperwork for my condo here, right? Yeah, so I bought a condo here in Manassas like 2 or 3 years ago. At the time, it rented for $1,600. Guess what it rents for today?
$1,850.
You're super close, because that was like an actual rental from like a year ago. No, it's like $2,000 now. It's like $400 of rent growth in like 2 or 3 years. Now, granted, it's been a heavy inflation couple of years, but wow. So that's the game you're playing here. You want to see the improvement in the value, and you want to see that, yeah, it's going to take a lot of equity up front to not be losing money, but then it gets better every year. Whereas if you go to a cash flow market where cash flow is a lot easier to come by, but it's probably never changing, right? Like it's going to keep up with inflation and that's about it. So if you buy wrong, it'll stay wrong. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, you can kind of get bailed out a little bit in Northern Virginia if you can just hang on for 5 years or 10 years. But that's not happening if you go to one of these other markets. Okay, so one of the other issues is that there's going to be barriers to entry if you're going into an appreciation market, right? There's going to be, by definition, an appreciation market is one that has a lot of price growth, so it's going to be an expensive piece of equity that you got to come by, and is going to be much more competitive. Does anyone know how much money Market Pro, which is a big wholesaler around here, spends monthly in order to find deals?
100,000.
Is it really that high now?
It wasn't, I talked to him a few years ago, but this was before COVID, so.
Last I heard was like 50 a month. Grand, 50 grand. I didn't know it was 100 grand, jeez. Okay,
Before COVID.
but so that's the level of competition you're entering into, so, you know, at your own risk, good luck. And then tenant pool and local laws is something we're going to talk a lot about, but what I really want to impress upon you here is that when you're choosing a market, you're choosing a tenant. When you're choosing a market, you're choosing a tenant. The bricks and mortar don't pay rent. Bricks and mortar depreciate and cost you money. What you care about is the tenant. Decide on your property by deciding on your tenant. Who do you want to be the person that you sign an agreement with to pay you the money? Because that's what's going to matter. And certain tenant pools, because of the incentives put in place by local laws, are going to have certain habits that you will tell us more about later.
Let me just stay on this for 1 second and just, I don't want you guys to think of this as a binary. This is really a spectrum.
Yes.
Right? There are markets, Malibu, California, where you are at a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of appreciation versus maybe rent. I don't know the Malibu rents, but just the idea, you know, parts of Manhattan where like the cost of the real estate may grow dramatically, but you are not cash flowing. Conversely, Cleveland. I've got a buddy that bought 19 doors in Cleveland in like 3.5 years because he was buying them at $60,000. He was putting minimum downs, but they were cash flowing at like $500 a pop, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. You got the other end of the spectrum, and like you probably want to ask yourself, like, where on that spectrum do you kind of want to be? I've had that question, that conversation, and I realized, especially as a person who's bought most of my homes in Western Prince William County, that I'm kind of at like, let's say a 6.5, 7 out of 10. I prefer appreciation over cash flow. It just has to meet a minimum standard of cash flow for me to kind of feel comfortable with it. Does that make sense? But this is just a personal, kind of analysis you need to do about what do you want, and recognize it's a spectrum. I will say also that the tenant pool in the appreciation market tends to be normally easier to manage and less headache and pain and stress.
Factor.
Say it again?
Because of the competition factor.
Because of the competition factor, whereas the tenant pool in the cash flow markets are more maintenance. I know of a friend of mine over the last 15 years who at one point had, let's say, dozens of doors in Prince George's County in Maryland. And he had to hire somebody to physically drive to every single house every week to collect rent in cash. That was part of the process of dealing with a cash flow market tenant pool. There's no judgment, but like you just got to kind of know what you're signing up for. It is a spectrum to be wise. Yes, Arnold, and actually speak into this, please.
My spinny wheel to see.
Yeah, I just want to mention real quick that.
So you just walk over to everybody and you just ask them like.
A lot of it has to do with your own personal.
Homework.
Just in text, just 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row.
Yep.
Into the who's going to win the book tonight. Spin to win.
When you buy a property with the intention of tenants, I feel like a large factor is to consider something as schools nearby, Walmart, type of other. About just price point, so just
Trader Joe's, Wegmans,
Exactly.
Starbucks, the whole thing.
The main highways as well, those different routes, especially in this area when everything's kind of directed to the DC northern
Yep.
part. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention
Good point. Okay, cool. I just wanted to add that little piece of the spectrum versus buying.
Okay. Anything else before I go to the next slide? Cool, let's go. All right, when it comes to the rehab, and we're talking about design and budget, first golden rule is don't over improve, okay? Nobody is going to pay you the level of extra rent that it will take for you to put in like a golden toilet, okay? It's not, first of all, they probably won't even like it. So make sure you're not over improving. You should mostly be fixing what's broken. And of course, check the comparable rentals. That would be first. Before I consider purchasing a property, I am looking at, out of all the rents, what do those houses look like? Like, get your realtor to pull up the entire set of listings and print out the pictures for you and look at them, right? You need to understand what it is you're comparing to, because if this rented for $2,800 and this rented for $2,500 and you open the pictures and they look the same, that's going to be confusing. You're going to need to figure out what is happening. But if you try to do like a full gut to make it beautiful and you have no comps that show you what that would be worth, you just took a risk, right? Because there's no data to show you what that actually, like how high above the highest comp will that go? You don't know.
Can we actually go back one slide? It plays into the rehab thing as well, but I want to just use this slide. The only other thing to just mention here that I think is valuable is, remember, you're only doing this as a snapshot in time. Especially as you're more over in the appreciation market, my rule was, if I can buy a house with 25%, and this is Western Prince William County, Bristow, Gainesville, Haymarket kind of market, right? If I can buy a house with 25% down, and those purchases were, when I haven't bought a long-term rental in that area since 2021, maybe 2022, but if I could do that and I was putting 25% down on a $300,000 to $400,000 property, and it was going to earn me $250 a month in rent, which is not a lot. You do the math on how much cash I'm outlaying, 25% down, with the house starting with the number 350, 375, and I'm only getting back 250. That met the qualifications for me. That was my personal, because over time, in a good market with good tenants and appreciation, that 250 was going to become 400, was going to become 650, was going to become 875 over time. So like everything that we're talking about this on a spectrum, and we're talking about the renovations, but just remember, you're not stuck in 2024. This does change over time. You just got to be able to have a little bit of forecasting in that. So sorry, go ahead to the next one, because it does come to these. Like, granted, you can only look at comps right now, and you're going to do your analysis and say, is this something I can purchase right now? And if the answer is yes, move forward. If the answer is no, then you can't. But know that this is going to evolve, especially if you're in a market where rents you would expect to increase over time. Go ahead.
So there is an exception to the only fix what's broken rule, and that is if you're doing a full gut anyways, spend the money to get like upper middle quality, because the marginal increase in material costs is definitely gonna be justified by attracting the highest quality tenant, right? What you want, again, is a good person, not a good set of bricks and mortar. So if you're doing the gut anyways, the difference in price between just a little bit nicer materials should be worth it in that case. Right? Okay. Finally, we get to the part where you're ready to buy, right? If you understand why you're doing this, you figured out the money piece and where it's coming from and who you're calling, that way you can move quick when the time comes. If you understand your market, so you've really dialed in where you're looking, if you understand what the level of rehab is going to be and who's going to give you your scope of work, if you've done all that homework, you're finally ready to go buy. So let's go buy it, right? This is going to come down to networking and negotiating for most of us, right? The networking piece is probably the easiest out of the three ways to acquire deals. You can do prospecting yourself. That's going to give you the highest quality stuff if you're good at it. If you suck at it, it might be like a 6-month regret of you trying to have a part-time job that you didn't cut it at. So if you're going to try that, I recommend Mike Capello with Sell Simply. He does a great job every Monday. You can hop on and learn how to wholesale from him. Networking, going to be the easiest way. Again, just buy one of Mike's deals or whoever. Is anyone here a deal finder?
Wholesaler?
Deal finder, wholesaler, stand up for a second. All right, so this should be everybody's best friend from now on. Before you leave, get their numbers, right? Because that's gold. So networking is going to be the easiest route usually. And then, of course, marketing. If you are ready to compete with Market Pro and build a business and have repeat deals and spend $50 grand a month, then we can talk about marketing. So that's first. You got to figure out your acquisition strategy. Deal structure is going to be the next piece that you need to understand. How are you actually structuring this? If you've never done it before and you don't have any of the documents, you're going to need to have like an agent who's done it before or a mentor, which could just be another investor. Usually the best way I've found to get another investor on board to mentor you is to say, let's do a deal. That way they benefit, right? They benefit. You want alignment of incentives. So also, lenders, tell me if this is true, who gets the best rates? The person who does 20 flips a month or the person who's never done a flip? 20 a month, right? You do get risk-based pricing, and if this is your first time, you're risky, right? You're risky. So the way to shortcut that is to partner with someone on your first couple of deals until you actually have a track record. That way you can get the better rates, which makes these marginally better. And then, of course, the best deals are the bad ones that you avoided, right? We don't think about it that way, but really, risk aversion is key in something like this. If we're trying to find a flip quality deal and you thought it was going to be a lipstick and you opened up a wall and oopsie daisy, now it's triple the reno budget. You went from recycling your capital to doing capital raising to try to come up with a shortfall. So that wouldn't be good. So make sure you vet properly, do your due diligence, and find partners who know more than you and are willing to tell it to you straight, right? Find a lender that's going to shoot you down. Find a contractor that's not just going to try to undercut the undercontractors. Pay them what they're worth, because contractors that are good, they know that they deserve the money, right? So they're going to quote you a real number. Questions on this? Sweet. Going once, going twice. All right. So we're going to do it.
Good. If this is the next slide, because we're doing a new slide thing. Go back. One more. Back here, sorry.
This is his favorite slide.
This is my favorite slide. I love this slide. One little thing that I've learned the hard way, and I had a conversation with a client yesterday, 2 days ago, about some bad tenants that I just want to give you guys as long-term landlords that I think is worth its weight in gold, and that is this. Underprice your renters, or your rentals. Mm-hmm. Under rent. If you know that you can rent this house for $2,500 a month, list it for $2,400 a month. If you want to avoid a lot of stress, strain, crappy tenants, all sorts of calls in the middle of the night for stuff you don't need to be dealing with, do not list your $2,500 a month rental for $2,750 because you think, oh, well, that's just going to be the way that the people that have that amount of money, they're going to be the ones that are going to be willing to pay the extra because they've got more income and I want higher earning. It's the exact opposite. Here's what happens. Everybody who's relatively intelligent can kind of see what other properties are renting for in that same general area. And if the market has kind of showed it's $2,500 a month, and you list it for $2,750, who are you attracting? You're attracting the people that know that their background check, their previous rental history, their credit score, their income is going to make them less desirable. But guess what? They can bring an extra $250 a month to have you overlook the blemishes of them being the tenants in your house. And they will do it all day long. They know that they're just going to get somebody that's not on the lease to live in the basement for $750 to cover that $250. You understand what's going on here? Conversely, somebody who's a fantastic tenant that knows that they've lived at the last property that they rented for 5 years straight and they fixed everything in their house. They never bothered their landlord. They didn't do any of this stuff. Their credit scores are rock solid. They're in good shape. They're going to be here. They're working for the U.S. military and they wake up every single morning and shine their shoes to a perfect shine. They believe that they're an amazing tenant and they should probably get a decent deal for being such a great tenant. Who do you want in your long-term financial asset? The super high quality, no bother to you whatsoever tenant who wants a deal, or the guy who's going to pay you an extra $250 but rip the stinking house apart while he's living in it? Trust me, it's the first one. So when you list that $2,500 a month rental property for $2,400 a month, you attract all of these people. And great news is you get a ton of applications 5, 10, 15 applications of hopefully really good people, and you can sift through the different, folks that are in there and say, hey, this guy is the guy who's going to take care of my asset like it was his. So one thing I learned, and by the way, you pick the other guy for $2,700 a month, he ends up ripping the house apart over 12 months. You've got to put X amount of dollars into it, but more important than even having to put the money into it, you don't have a renter for that month that he moved out because you need that month to get the house back in shape. How much money did you lose by trying to make an extra $250 a month? Trust me, lose 100 to make long-term really much better outcomes. So anyway, that's something I learned a long, hard way. I just wanted to share that real quick.
Matt, you're so passionate about tenants.
Yeah, dude. Hey, anybody had a bad tenant in a rental property before? Did you become Thomas? Thomas literally standing up. He's like, how high can I get my hand?
Those of you who don't know Thomas Price, he's a property manager.
He's going to be sharing in just a second here. But how passionate did you become after you had a bad tenant? You're like, dude, I am not dealing with that again, right? Like, yes, I am passionate.
Who's ever been a bad tenant? No, I'm just kidding. All right.
The phrase tenant all of a sudden you can't spend the money you got it before, and so now you get another bad tenant. Over 10 years.
And then you call us and we'll list it for you. All right, so
Thank you guys for that.
we're going to do our next breakout. This is going to be 5 minutes. I call this the Connector Catalyst. Let's get you practiced at networking at a high level. What I want you to do is monetize this event tonight. And the way we're going to do it is by asking everyone at your table, who else do you want to meet? Because there's this thing called a connection fee that after you get good at this, you can start asking for. Because if you were to ask everyone here what they needed, who do they need to meet, what are they missing, could be that tonight here's an example. Earlier this year, I met someone who was a agent. The agent needed to find an entire portfolio for sale because he had a whale of a buyer that was hungry to buy a whole portfolio and didn't want to be bothered with individual purchases. A couple days later, I was at another networking event, and guess what? Somebody had a portfolio for sale, right? Now, as it turns out, that one didn't work out, womp womp. But it's the kind of scenario where I could have collected a fee for connecting the parties together. So get good at knowing what people want and help them. And if you help enough people, you can get your cut. Now, tonight, I'm not asking you to necessarily get the connector fee. I want you more to just practice learning what people want.
Unless you can.
But if you can get it, go get it, right? Because, by the way, the way you get it is you just say, hey, what would it be worth to you? Because I know how to solve that problem. I can get it to you. If it works out, would you be willing to sign something that says that in the event it works out with this particular person, I get 3%, whatever, name your terms, right? Because I know a lot of us, right? Like if somebody said that they had my dream deal, all I need to do is pay them a fee, I'd pay that fee. Anyhow, 5 minutes, talk to your table, find out, write it down, get your notes. What do these people want? Who can you introduce them to? All right, go ahead.
Boom. Grab a table, grab a table. I'm going to hit the facilities real quick. Oh, sorry.
All right.